But one of the things that I was looking at was a particular case that has ramifications for a whole bunch of cases that are out there. And that was dealing with this particular New Haven, Connecticut lawsuit that was brought, where these firefighters said that they were being discriminated against because the city of New Haven decided they were going to throw a test out because it didn't reach a certain number of people that they wanted to promote of African American descent. So everybody had a chance to kind of look at the particular decision that came down, and I just wanted to see what you thought about it. And I'll start with you this time, Charles.
Okay. I think by looking at the way the case evolved, that it was more of a self-fulfilling prophecy because the city officials didn't validate the test. So the fact that they didn't validate the test, by that what I'm saying that it didn't test what it was supposed to be testing in regards to people taking a test, and the people that got higher grades, it meant that they were best to be fire captains. I mean, you know, captains in the fire as firefighters. So when you look at what Ginsburg said, she said that when you that you must assess the test from the backdrop of, from the context of historical and ongoing inequality with the New Haven Fire Department, because from 2003 there was only one African American fire captain out of 20, I think it was 22 fire captains, and I think that's I guess you could say not a formula or the same type of effect that's happening in basically every city when you look at the fire department, that there aren't many minorities that are on the fire department.
But do you think that one of the reasons why this case got overturned because they thought it was an idea of supporting quotas, which I don't think they were really trying to do?
Well, I mean,
or were they?
Well, I mean, you know, you have to ask proper questions first. So to me, since there's been all this discussion about it, the one question I haven't heard yet is, what was the commonality of the questions that they got wrong and the other people got right?
So you don't think there was an analysis of the test itself?
I haven't heard any.
No, there wasn't, because like I said, they didn't validate the test.
No, but I'm just saying the idea, but as there's been a billion independent journalists looking at it. So then to me, at this point, with all this media coverage, we should have probably heard it by now. And so I heard no thing that, okay, well, the, quote, white firemen got these questions on average right, and then these black and Latino fire people got these on average wrong.
So to see if there's a bias within the test itself.
Yeah, and I think that's what the article pointed out. They pointed out that in the court case, no one had proven that there was a bias in the test. But more interestingly, I think, is did anyone try? Did anyone actually examine the test to see if there was a bias? And since they concentrated, and I think they probably won, maybe rightfully so, if you look at the fact that they said that the other side didn't prove their case. If they came up and said, well, the reason we threw the test out is because, you know, we thought that we might be sued, you know, if we didn't throw it out, then you can argue that and win a case easily. And you know, say that's not a strong enough argument. But if someone actually analyzed the test to see if there was a bias, or if, like the brother said, if you saw that there were certain questions that, you know, didn't really fit the criteria as to whether or not you would be successful as a captain, then that's a little bit of a better argument. But, you know, the only contention I have is that we've had countless times in history where we've proven inequity, we've proven discrimination, and we've proven prejudice, and nothing's done about it anyway.
Well, you know, the thing that I thought was interesting, and one reporter said, you know, the city wanted this result because they did everything to make sure that it came about. They didn't do anything to make sure that anything was fair. They wanted this result. And it makes me wonder about the people that were within the administration of New Haven and stuff, and what their political agenda was behind this particular case, because they didn't seem to do anything to support what they were trying to do.
Well, no, but they did do what they needed to do to support their argument, in that they didn't follow up. So they wanted this outcome. They wanted it, like I said, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. They wanted it because, look, it's just like what Ginsburg said. When you look at it in context with the historical and ongoing inequality within the fire department. This is the way it's always been. So they're just maintaining the status quo.
Right, but what it does is that kind of discussion does exactly what I said about the Charlie Rose situation. It takes it from, instead of discussing a set of facts that everybody can say, okay, well, now let's look at the facts. Instead, it pushes it to this emotional thing because people are...
Quotas.
Well, in other words, you're discussing something that's unquantifiable, actually. It's not really a tangible thing.
Well, it is quantifiable, but
No.
they didn't quantify it.
No. But I'm just saying the idea that if the discussion is going to be, well, since there has been obviously a historical legacy of this, that's not the argument in my head to have. The argument to have is the idea of, okay, let's look at the test and let's just look at the criteria and actually point it out. Use the facts, because what we're doing is we're just, because when you look at the discussion is all about how people feel, whether it's about quotas or whether it's not about quotas. Does it feel about this? How do you feel about that? Are you supporting the firefighters, the black firefighters or the white firefighters? It just turns into a horse race or like a gladiator race where everybody's like yelling and fighting for their side like it's a football game.
Well, it should be about equal justice and equal protection underneath the law. And when we're talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, when you look at the interpretation of the court, it's really going to change the way a lot of cities are going to be looking at these type of tests. And not only in terms of how they go about vigorously trying to get people of color in these positions, but also about, the idea litigation is going to follow if they don't do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, you know what it brought to mind for me? It brought to mind the fact that, the whole test-taking idea and whether or not tests can be slanted, because I remember years ago, Regent Adelaide Sanford here in New York, she talked about the fact that there are some cultural differences in the thought processes of different groups, just the way they were raised. And the example she brought is that, the whole African holistic viewpoint, people kind of look at the big picture if they come from that cultural background, where if you had a little kid that went on a summer vacation and they came to the teacher, and the teacher may not be from that same cultural background, and she may say, to the Caucasian child, she may say, what did you do on your summer vacation? They'll say, well, I went to Florida, then we went to, Georgia, and then we came home. And then the African child may say, oh, well, we went to Georgia and there were some pirates and it reminded me of when I was in Haiti, and, and they may go a little bit around making some certain connections just because that's their mindset. And next thing you know, they'll be labeled ADD, that how come you're not sticking to the linear point that I asked you or the question, but it's a different outlook, a different way of looking at things, and that's something that we need to keep in mind. The other thing it brought to mind for me is that a lot of the tests, just like the tests we have now, the standardized tests where they're just concentrating on, we want this, and this answer, certain people or certain questions they have in the school system, they may say, why is America the best government? Now, if you don't think America is the best government, how can you even answer that question properly? So the way questions are phrased on a test and your cultural background and the way you look at things are going to slant whether or not you pass that test and be promoted or, succeed in what they're trying to look at.